He didn't just win with his fists. Ali won fights before he even got into the ring. Muhammad Ali has always been remembered as one of the greatest boxers of all time. But beyond the speed of his punches and the strength of his endurance, there was something invisible. Something that didn't show up in the statistics, but that changed the course of each fight: his mind. Ali had a rare talent turning words into weapons, provocations into accurate blows, phrases into hooks that hurt more than punches. To many, it seemed like arrogance. To others, it was pure strategy. And by the time the bell rang, his opponents were already shaken, insecure, bearing the weight of the humiliation he had planted days before in interviews, press conferences, and even casual encounters. Ali used every opportunity to get inside the heads of those he faced. He called them weak, mocked their abilities, gave them cruel nicknames, and exposed them in front of the press. But there was method to the spectacle. While drawing laughter from the audience, Ali sowed doubt in the hearts of his rivals. The boxer who stepped into the ring against him was no longer the same man he had trained with months before. He was someone troubled, pressured, with his mind torn between fighting and proving he wasn't what Ali claimed. This skill didn't come out of nowhere. From a young age, Ali understood that boxing wasn't just physical, it was psychological. And while many practiced punches, he practiced sentences. While others sought endurance, he sought attention. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about dominating. And this tactic would become one of his greatest weapons, capable of toppling giants, destabilizing champions, and transforming every fight into an unforgettable spectacle. Today we'll delve into this unique facet of the champion, how Muhammad Ali used provocations not only to entertain the audience, but to break his enemies before the first punch landed. A war waged with sharp words, sharp wit, and almost unbearable confidence. A war where victory began long before the fight, before any punch was thrown. Before the bell echoed in the arena, Muhammad Ali was already in combat. For him, the fight didn't begin in the ring, but days before, when the press gathered, when fans eagerly awaited provocations, and when the eyes of the world were fixed on his words. Ali knew that boxing was about muscles, yes, but also about the mind, and that an opponent's body could be strong, but if their mind was weak, defeat was only a matter of time. One of the most iconic moments of this power occurred before the fight against Sonny Liston. Liston was a monster. He intimidated with his physique, his brutal strength, and his history of quick knockouts. Many believed that Ali, still young and with a reputation for exhibitionism, would be just another victim of the champion's fury. But Ali, instead of cowering under the pressure, decided to attack where Liston least expected. Psychologically, he spent days calling him an old bear, mocking his slowness, and turning Liston's feared image into a laughingstock. At a press conference, Ali shouted in front of the cameras, "That bear won't catch me. I'll dance around him until I drop from exhaustion." The audience laughed, the journalists took notes, and Liston, silently, began to feel the weight of humiliation, that it was a carefully planned spectacle. Ali would enter events in flashy outfits, shout improvised rhymes, and make absurd promises, like knocking out his opponent in such and such a round. It wasn't just self-promotion, it was a psychological trap. By challenging his rivals' pride, Ali forced them to fight not with strategy, but with rage. And rage, in boxing, is a deadly poison. An opponent who loses his temper opens his guard, falls into the rhythm imposed by the other, and becomes easy prey. Liston, accustomed to terrorizing others, didn't know how to handle someone who ridiculed him in public. In training, he appeared dejected and irritated, and even his own teammates noticed his confidence was waning. The roles had reversed. The predator was now cornered, hunted by words as sharp as razors, and there was more. Ali didn't just attack his rival, he engaged the audience. The more people laughed at his taunts, the more isolated his opponent felt. It was as if the entire arena was already against him before the fight began. The psychological loneliness was devastating. Imagine training for months, carrying the weight of expectation, and suddenly realizing that the entire world believes the mocking voice echoing against you. This was Ali's true move, making his enemy enter the ring already defeated, his fists heavy not with fatigue, but with insecurity. When they finally stepped into the ring, Liston no longer looked the same. His body was the same giant, but his eyes held doubt. Every time Ali shouted a taunt from within the ropes, Liston flinched, as if those words were invisible punches. And it was in this fragile state that the giant began to crumble. In boxing they say the first victory happens in training. For Ali, the first victory happened in his opponent's mind. He didn't just fight, he dismantled the other's confidence piece by piece until only fear remained. And in that moment, facing Sonny Liston, it became clear to the world, Ali didn't need to wait for the bell. His war began long before, when a man loses confidence in himself. Not all the strength of the body can save him. Ali didn't limit himself to isolated provocations. He created veritable verbal spectacles. His favorite weapon was repetition. Short, sharp phrases, repeated so often that they became mantras, echoing in the minds of his opponents day and night. It didn't matter if they were at press conferences, interviews, or occasional encounters in hotel corridors before the fight. Ali haunted them with words. He said things like, "You're too slow. You can't keep up with my dancing. You already lost before you even fought." These statements, delivered with a mocking smile, gained strength because Ali believed them with absolute conviction. He didn't seem to be acting. He seemed to be declaring an inevitable fate. A notorious example was his preparation to face Floyd Patterson. Patterson was known as a dignified, disciplined, and respected man, but Ali cruelly nicknamed him the Rabbit, insinuating that he would run in the ring, cowardly evading his blows. Patterson, offended, tried to maintain his composure, but the press repeated the nickname, fans chanted in the streets, and the humiliation spread like wildfire. When the fight began, Patterson was no longer the same confident champion. He was unfocused, fighting more to silence Ali than to win. And as always, this imbalance cost him dearly. This was the essence of Ali's tactics, turning the fight into a game of vanity and pride, forcing his opponents to fight emotionally. He knew that in boxing, whoever loses control loses the fight. Therefore, his every word had a clear target. It wasn't just arrogance. It was calculation. It was strategy. It was psychology applied brutally. While his rival's blood boiled, Ali maintained the calm of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The intensity of this technique was amplified because Ali wasn't just speaking to his opponent, but to the world. His provocations echoed in newspapers, on TV shows, on the radio, and even in barroom conversations. It was impossible for a rival to escape it. Wherever he was, he would hear his name associated with the insult Ali had created. It was like psychological torture that didn't end until the day of the fight. Ali understood that being a champion wasn't enough. He had to be a spectacle. He dominated the cameras, the crowds, the microphones, and used all of this as a platform to pressure his rivals. When he said, in public, "I am the greatest of all time, no one can beat me," it wasn't just vanity. It was a prophecy, delivered to the world, that transformed each opponent into a supporting actor in his own downfall. Anyone who dared contradict him needed to not only defeat a man, but also debunk a legend built before millions of spectators. The weight of this crushed even the most experienced, and it was at this point that Ali displayed his genius. He knew that the audience would always, subconsciously, believe more in a man who spoke confidently than in one who merely defended himself in silence. If one said "I'll win" and the other said "We'll see," the moral victory was already sealed. The audience laughed with Ali, awaiting his triumph, while the opponent, alone, wallowed in ridicule. This is how Muhammad Ali created a combat style that combined punches and phrases, dance and irony, spectacle and psychological warfare. He transformed himself into a showman inside and outside the ring, but every gesture, every word, had a hidden purpose: to destroy the enemy from within. And if you're impressed by his ability to win with his mouth before he could win with his fists, just imagine how this weapon worked when used against rivals already harboring deep-seated doubts and fears. In the next chapters, we'll delve even deeper into this ruthless strategy. But first, if you're enjoying this journey through the mind of Muhammad Ali, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and comment on what's most impressive to you so far. This helps spread this story and motivates us to continue bringing you intense narratives like this. Because just as Ali knew, the power of words can change everything. Muhammad Ali didn't just talk. He turned his taunts into art. He was a poet, an improviser, a master of ceremonies in his own psychological warfare. While other fighters gave short, dry interviews, Ali appeared before the cameras as if on stage, reciting verses that blended arrogance and humor. He created slogans, rhymes, and catchphrases that stuck in people's minds like music. One of his most famous taunts came before his rematch with Sonny Liston. "I float like a butterfly, I sting like a bee, hands can't touch what eyes can't see." The phrase spread across the United States, became headlines, and became a rallying cry. It wasn't just a prediction, it was a spell cast on Liston, which the whole world listened to until the day of the fight. Ali's power lay in transforming every press conference into a spectacle. He didn't just speak to reporters, he spoke to the crowds that would pack the arena. He made a point of ridiculing his rivals with cruel nicknames, like Big Ugly Bear for Liston or Mummy for Joe Frazier. With every word, Ali undermined the dignity of his opponents, who tried to maintain their composure but were forced to watch their image be publicly dismantled. Imagine training for months, enduring pain, building a reputation, and suddenly seeing it all reduced to a joke that echoed on radios, newspapers, and televisions in millions of homes. This was Ali's cruelty. He didn't just win, he turned champions into caricatures, and there was something even more strategic in his rhymes. By promising a knockout in a given round, Ali not only created anticipation in the crowd, but also put psychological pressure on his rival. If he said, "I'm going to finish him in the 6th round," everyone would count down the minutes of the fight, waiting for the moment to arrive. This made the opponent feel watched, controlled, as if each second were a step toward the predicted destiny. Even when the fight didn't go according to plan, the impact of the prediction had already wreaked havoc. The enemy fought not only against Ali, but against the specter of his own humiliation of being defeated exactly as he had predicted. Joe Frazier was perhaps the most emblematic example of how these provocations worked. Frazier was tough, resilient, and had the heart of a warrior, but Ali nicknamed him Gorilla and began carrying a stuffed animal around during press conferences, beating it as if it were his rival. The scene went viral before the word viral even existed, and Frazier felt the weight of the insult not only as an athlete but as a man. The nickname echoed, children screamed in the streets, and the resentment grew so strong that the rivalry between the two went beyond boxing, becoming personal, bloody, and unforgettable. What could have been just another fight turned into a historic war because Ali knew Frazier's mind would not emerge unscathed from this exposure. Ali also understood that the more the audience enjoyed themselves, the more alone their opponent felt. Every laugh from the crowd was like an invisible punch, every rhyme a stab at their confidence. The fight didn't begin with the bell, but the moment the rival realized there was no escaping Ali's shadow, it was an unequal battle, because Ali had two weapons, his fists and his words, and both were deadly. In the end, the spectacle served to clear purposes. First, to weaken the enemy. Second, to transform Ali into a legend. Because he knew that while other boxers would be remembered only for their knockouts, he would be remembered for his lines that would echo for generations. And he was right. Today, decades later, we still repeat his rhymes as if they were hymns, still cite his taunts as if they were oracles. And the great truth of this chapter is that Ali never entered a fight alone. He brought with him the audience, the press, and public opinion, all complicit in his psychological attack. It was an unequal war. The rival fought alone. Ali fought with the world at his side. And if we've understood how he shaped the spectacle so far, in the next chapter we'll see how this strategy could be extremely cruel, leaving scars that went far beyond the ring marks that didn't fade even after the fights ended. If there was a rival who felt the brunt of Muhammad Ali's provocations, it was Joe Frazier. The duel between the two wasn't just sporting, it was personal, it was visceral. It was a war that went beyond boxing and left deep scars. Frazier came from a tough childhood, marked by poverty and racism. He earned respect through effort and dignity, becoming a champion through sweat, without relying on spectacle. But Ali, seeing him as an opponent worthy of attention, decided to target him. He called him a gorilla, mocked his fighting style, and ridiculed his appearance in public. And it didn't stop there. In interviews, he said, "That man is slow, stupid, he shouldn't be in the ring with me." Each word echoed like a knife piercing Frazier's honor. Ali's cruelty reached even more painful proportions because the public was drawn into his game. Children chanted gorilla when they saw Frazier on the streets. The press repeated Ali's statements as if they were absolute truths. And suddenly, the man who had conquered the world with discipline and hard work found himself transformed into a national joke. This damaged his pride irreversibly. Backstage, Frazier vented, "He humiliated me in front of the whole world. He didn't just want to beat me, he wanted to destroy me." This conflict became even more evident in the so-called fight of the century in 1971. Both were undefeated, both carried titles and storied histories. But Ali wasn't content with promoting a grandiose bout. He wanted to inflame the rivalry. At press conferences, he held up signs, shouted insults, and shoved Frazier in front of the cameras. He turned each encounter into chaos, while Frazier tried to maintain his dignity but, inside, harbored a growing rage. When they entered the ring, they weren't just two boxers. They were two men waging an emotional war, carrying hurts that went beyond their fists. Ali believed that enraging Frazier would make him lose control, but with him, it had the opposite effect. Frazier transformed into a wall of hatred. He fought furiously, as if each blow were a settling of scores. For 15 rounds, the two men exchanged devastating blows, but it was Frazier who, with a powerful left hook, knocked Ollie down and proved to the world that he would not be reduced to a nickname. That night was not just a victory in the ring, it was an emotional revenge. Frazier showed that, however strong the venom of Ollie's words, there were men who did not break, but who used pain as fuel. However, the psychological damage was already done. Frazier never forgot. Even years later, in retirement, he still spoke bitterly about how Ollie had humiliated him. He said the champion had crossed the line, that he had turned him into a public enemy when he only wanted to be recognized as an athlete. Ollie, at times in his old age, even regretted it. He admitted that perhaps he had gone too far, but the wounds remained. They weren't wounds of the body, but of the soul, wounds that not even time could erase. This chapter reveals the cruelest side of Ollie's strategy. He knew how to play with the mind, but he didn't always calculate the consequences of what he inflicted. For the audience, it was entertainment. For his opponents, it was real pain. And in Joe Frazier's case, that pain was never forgotten. In the end, the harsh lesson remains. Words can lift a man before the world, but they can also scar him forever. And in Ollie's case, his provocations were as sharp as his fists. In the ring, he could knock out. Outside of it, he could leave scars that would never heal. And it is on this border between spectacle and cruelty that we arrive at the final chapter, where we will understand how this strategy, even if ruthless, also carried a message that transcended boxing and became a legacy. As the years passed, Muhammad Ali's provocations ceased to be merely a tactic for winning fights. They became part of his identity, something the entire world came to associate with his image. He had created a new style within boxing, that of a warrior who didn't just need his fists to defeat. He needed his mind, his voice, the unshakable confidence that transformed every press conference into a spectacle greater than the fight itself. But this invisible legacy extended beyond the sports arena. Ollie showed that words could be weapons of transformation, capable of shaping destinies, creating legends, and inspiring generations. The impact was clear not only on his opponents but on the entire sports landscape. Athletes from different disciplines began to realize that training the body wasn't enough. They needed to dominate the media stage. The concept of sports entertainment gained momentum because Ollie had paved the way. His verses, rhymes, and theatricality were reproduced in newspapers, radio, and television sets around the world. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a narrator of his own story, a creator of myths in real time. When he said, "I am the greatest of all time," it wasn't just vanity. It was the conscious construction of an immortal persona, a title that still resonates unchallenged today. But there was also another side to this legacy. Many opponents never recovered from the scars he left. Some carried resentment to the end of their lives, like Joe Frazier, who never forgave the public humiliation. Others, like George Foreman, managed to transform their anger into respect, later recognizing that Ollie made him grow as a man and as an athlete. This duality is an essential part of Ollie's legacy. He demonstrated the power of words, but also revealed the risks of using them like sharp blades. He created eternal rivalries, but also united masses around his figure. Inside and outside the ring, Ollie made it clear that provocation wasn't just about destruction, but also about inspiration. For the black community in the United States, amid a period of segregation and injustice, Ollie was the voice that dared to confront not only opponents but also the system. When he ridiculed rivals, he also conveyed a message of resistance, pride, and freedom. He said, "I will not be silent. I will not bow my head. I am the greatest." And with that, many young people who felt invisible began to believe they could be great. The chapters of his life revealed two inseparable sides: the showman who crushed opponents with cruel phrases, and the symbol of courage who gave voice to those who had none. This contradiction made Muhammad Ali more than a boxer. It made him a human legend, full of lights and shadows. A man who won battles with punches and left scars with words, but who, above all, taught the world that confidence is as lethal a weapon as any physical blow. And perhaps the phrase that best defines his legacy wasn't uttered in rhyme or before an audience, but in the essence of his stance: the fight begins before the fight. This is Ali's great lesson, because when someone truly believes in their victory, they make the whole world believe with them, and, at that moment, the opponent already enters defeated. In the end, Ali didn't just provoke to win, he provoked to last forever, and he did.